Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Weatherall, Vice President of Data Science and Artificial Intelligence here at AstraZeneca, and going to be talking today about how we turn science into novel new medicines by unlocking the power of data and AI. So to start with a little bit about myself, I'm originally a physicist, a particle physicist, who has sort of gone through a couple of career changes and ended up in life sciences. And the life sciences is a place where I think skills and capabilities in data science and AI can make a real difference to people's lives. So it really is a pleasure and a privilege to be doing what I'm doing today and helping to improve health outcomes for people and develop the next generation of novel new medicines. We'll also touch on collaboration later as well. And you see some of the other hats that I wear on this slide, which are kind of related to how AstraZeneca as a scientific entity collaborates with other organizations, academia and public sector organizations to achieve our mission. So I'll introduce you to research and development here at AstraZeneca, talk a little bit about why data science and artificial intelligence is important in research and development for us, show some specific examples of how this is working in practice, and as I said before, touch on how important collaboration is to us in all of this. So here's what we stand for. At AstraZeneca, we push the boundaries of science to deliver life-changing medicines, and you can read the rest of this page for yourselves. But it's a really important point. We're a company that's remained focused on research, on new discoveries, and on finding new differentiated medicines that make a meaningful difference to people's lives. So very innovation-driven, very science-driven, very research-driven organization. And we do that in research and development in two broad areas. So we have one area of activity focused on oncology and looking at eliminating cancer as a cause of death across a number of different types of cancer. And then we have a whole activity around a number of other diseases as well that you can see here, such as cardiovascular, respiratory conditions, liver and kidney disease, immunological conditions, neuroscientific conditions, etc. So we have a very sort of broad and deep scientific focus in terms of the diseases we want to focus on and where we really, really want to move the needle and make a meaningful difference to the lives of patients with these conditions. We're a global organization, and I think this is very important also for our research. We tap into skills and talent and capabilities from around the world. I think really importantly and sort of topical for this meeting, we're increasing our footprint in the southeast of England, and this year we'll be formally moving into our brand new R&D centre in Cambridge on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. So a really thriving set of research hubs around the world. So regarding data science and AI, let's go a little deeper and see how that plays a part in our research and development organization. Here's a place where we start because we think this is a very meaningful slogan, if you will, for how we frame the use of AI, not just in the development of innovative new medicines, but in the healthcare sector more generally. And again, you can read the phrase for yourself, but really I think the take-home message there is artificial intelligence is a critically important tool to augment the way we work and improve the science we do. It's a complement and it's an assistant to help our scientists do even better science. The second message there, of course, is that the future is going to be increasingly dominated, we believe, by organizations that can appropriately and optimally harness these new developments. And so where has this all come from? Let me tell the sort of potted history story. One way of thinking about it is the preponderance of data that's now available to us. So if we look across this schematic of the research and development pipeline shown along the bottom of this slide, what we have now are multiple different types of scientific data, importantly, that are not just being generated by any one organization, they're coming from public healthcare systems and other private organizations as well. And each one of those data sources, an incomplete list of which is shown on this page, have the potential to change the way we do research and make decisions at each step on this pipeline. So there's a huge growth in the amount of scientific data available and how it can fuel our decisions, and a multiplicity of places where it can be used. And this is how we think at a high level about our strategic journey in the future. We think about taking these data types, moving to a world where they're increasingly connected and interrelated, and we can start to identify novel scientific hypotheses and scientific findings at the intersection of these data sets. And then ultimately to a world of interconnected algorithmic intelligence or cognitive computing, where we have all of this data interconnected and machines help us to reason over it and bring out even more new hypotheses and findings and help us to make better decisions, help us to automate processes. By some estimation, we are somewhere along the middle of this pink arrow at the moment, and trying to move as rapidly as we can towards the right-hand side of this picture. And what will this help us to do? Well, the short answer is that there are a few areas within our R&D enterprise where we can't apply some kind of data science or AI-based innovation. And a few of the key areas are shown here in terms of how data can help us to understand different components of disease, how to invent new medicines, how to understand how effective our medicines are under clinical testing. But generally, all of this for me boils down to a couple of things, put very simply. We're trying to implement data science and AI in our research and development pipelines to either be faster or more accurate, or both. So if an implementation of artificial intelligence can help us to speed up cycle times without any reduction in quality, meaning that we may be able to get those medicines to the patients that need them more quickly and accelerate that process, that for us is a win. Also, if AI can help us to pick the winners more effectively in an R&D pipeline with an amount of attrition in it, where some projects succeed and some projects fail, if we can place our bets more effectively, that's also a win for us. And both of those aims are focused on getting the right medicines to the right patients as fast as we can and with equivalent quality. So that's what we're all about. Let's look at some examples of just how we try to do that and how we are, in fact, doing this today. One example is imaging. Imaging, of course, is a field ripe for AI and machine learning-led innovation. And in some fields, this is becoming very well established. Think about when you upload a photo these days, for instance, and it automatically recognizes people's faces and things like that in it. So it's a great field from which to borrow and learn and apply in the medical sector and the research sector these kind of innovations. And for us, this is a critical tool for doing things like research in cancer, in oncology, and understanding what a pathological lesion might look like, either on the skin or a piece of tissue or from an image of the body or part of the body. And computers are becoming incredibly good at doing this with human level or better than human level accuracy. So if we look at this example, this is a piece of tissue from a tumor, which we believe may express a protein called PD-L1. This is important because if it does, it means we can treat it with one of our immunotherapies, and we can also see the effect of that therapy on the tumor. So using imaging for this purpose is critically important. And what we're doing is moving from the situation on the left, where a human pathologist will be looking down a digital microscope and trying to judge the amount of that brown staining you can see, to judge the amount of protein expression, to the situation on the right, where this has been marked up using machine learning, AI, in other words, computer-based pattern recognition, which not only is, once it's trained, is a great deal faster, cheaper, it can do so with a much smaller error rate, but also it actually gives us more information in this case as well, because the different coloured dots are identifying not just the potential tumour cells and their levels of protein expression, but actually it's recognising all the other types of cells in the image as well. And we can get a readout on what the proportion is of different types of cells, and that gives us critical information about this particular cancer and how it can be treated and how it may respond to treatment. So really critical AI-driven science and automation here, allowing our human scientists to use this tool as an assistant to augment their activities, and they can focus more on the scientific decision making rather than getting eye strain looking down the microscope. And we don't stop there. So we're very interested in taking some of these specific examples and then kind of growing them out and saying, well, what does it look like? If you remember that picture before of interconnected data, if we do start connecting different data sources, and how much can we learn and understand about how to treat and even cure certain diseases? And so that's why we're participating, speaking of collaboration again, on this idea of the Google Map of Cancer, which will be partly imaging based, but also integrate other data sets to give us that, what I like to call a 360-degree view of cancer and understand it from all angles so that we can best tackle it. Another area I wanted to talk about today are our knowledge graphs. So I've mentioned a number of times the importance of interconnected data and how we are finding new scientific discoveries when we link data that perhaps hadn't been interconnected before. And what we do with our knowledge graphs is we take data from lots of these different scientific modalities that you saw before, and an expanded list of which are shown on this page. And we link them in a way that captures relationships between the different entities in those data sets. And once we have these graphs built out, and they might be billions and billions of data points, we can then interrogate that graph using AI and ask it certain scientific questions. Given that it has all this data in there, we're now using the AI to identify patterns that might be useful to us within the graph. So for instance, we might say, okay, we're interested in chronic kidney disease, and we'd like the graph to tell us from all its data which genes are relevant, which genes appear to be upregulated in chronic kidney disease. And because the graph has information both about the disease and the genetic factors, it can answer this question for us. We then might refine that question: which of these are genetically linked to CKD? So they're not just upregulated in the disease, there's actually a biological link that we found through relationships in the graph. And then we can refine our question further: which of these might be suitable, might be druggable, might be suitable for developing a medicine against? So we're interested in the targets where it appears actually scientifically feasible that we could then go on to develop a medicine that could actually modulate or lessen the disease or cure the patient of the disease in some way. And then we could ask ourselves, how are these things interrelated? Because at this stage, you normally get the answer is there's a number of ways you could tackle this disease. But what's important for us is to understand those sub-networks and how are those genes and proteins interacting with each other. Biological systems are very complex, very interactive. And sometimes you have to understand this mesh of connections, again, so that when you develop the medicine, you really are having a meaningful effect on the disease pathway, not just on one small locus on that pathway. And so we're able to do this because, as I said, the graph has all of this interrelated information, and we can ask this iterative series of questions about the disease and continue to refine our question and ask the graph to refine the answer. So hopefully that was a nice way of seeing how, in a schematic way, we can ask a series of questions of a huge interconnected data set, but quickly boil it down to information that is directly useful for the development of novel new medicines. So 2 flagship examples there for us, and there are actually many more. Sadly, I don't have time to talk about today. As I said before, there are probably few areas in our research and development where we're not applying some form of AI, machine learning, or data science to either speed up or be more accurate. Some of these are very well implemented, as you've just seen. Some are more experimental because, in some cases, this is new territory. So it's very exciting and with a lot of promise. So I said I'd finish by saying a little bit about collaboration. And this really is important. This is something that I kind of like to mention every time I talk about this, because I like to say data science is a team sport. And as an organization, we're very connected when it comes to collaborations. You can see that the UK is a pivotal place for us to have scientific collaborations, whether that, and this picture counts them all, right? So this could be collaborations with academic institutes, biotech, small and large companies. So a terrifically fertile place in the UK for us to do science in collaboration and do things together, which are difficult for any one of us to do alone. Here's a great recent example. Some of you may have seen the news out there. We've recently kicked off the Cambridge Centre for AI in Medicine, or the CCAIM, and we're delighted actually to be working both with a fellow pharmaceutical company in GSK, but also with world-leading researchers, including Mahela van der Schaar, Andres Floto, and really working with some of the best academic researchers in the world, genuinely a world-leading group, to sort of take forward and explore solutions to some of the critical challenges we've got. So think of some of the areas I've just shown. There's a lot more work to do there to really understand how far we can push these technologies. So this is an incredibly important 5-year cutting-edge research collaboration for us. And one more example, this is now an example sort of more in the commercial startup space rather than the academic space, but I think it's really important to foster these kind of collaborations as well. So this is an AI Incubation Lab. Again, 5 years, we're just about to kick it off. It's very well supported by the Israeli government. It's a collaboration of companies again, because we believe that's the strength in numbers and we can do better science together. And we will this year lay down a number of scientific challenges, which we then invite new companies into the lab to be incubated and supported and mentored, and they'll work with us to sort of collaboratively develop solutions to some of our biggest challenges. So again, it's a very sort of collaborative ecosystem. There are some problems that the academic sector is best positioned to work on. There are some problems which small companies, small agile companies are best positioned to work on. And I think we can each bring a different piece to the party and all help tackle disease together. And so that's what I have time for today. Happy to hear from any of you, and stay safe out there.
Firstly, Jim, thank you ever so much for your time, for being here. It's obviously a particularly busy time for AstraZeneca right now. But yeah, so hugely appreciate you being here with us. So if I could pose just a couple of questions to you then. So first off, where do you see, or what do you expect to get from data science and AI within healthcare over the next sort of 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, thanks, Darren. For sure, it's a busy time, but a time that's fertile with opportunity. If we think about the sort of broader healthcare landscape, I think, what the last year or so has brought into sharp focus is the importance of data and being able to use that data in agile, intelligent ways to make really, really important decisions, some of the most important decisions. If I, zoom in our part of the world, maybe to give a couple of examples in developing novel medicines for a range of different diseases. We've been using AI to help us do things like design the molecular structures of the molecules that go into our medicines. We've been using huge interconnected knowledge graphs, as you saw in the presentation, to kind of sift through mountains of biomedical data and use AI type algorithms to try and find new biological hypotheses in that data. So there's plenty of examples already being kind of utilized today, I think, to sort of find new pathways into healthcare and new ways to help people live better quality lives with better health outcomes. And I think that can only accelerate and grow in those next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And do you think there's anything that's stopping us right now? Is there any particular improvements, like data structure or anything, that's needed to enable us to get the most from it?
Yeah, I think, data has to flow in a way that makes sense, that links to other types of data to allow that decision making. So again, I mean, I could think of this on both scales that I talked about before, both the wider healthcare system, where, again, as we've seen, it's incredibly useful if data can come together in the right way to make ongoing decisions to optimize people's health all the time. And again, not least, in our part of the world, developing medicines at AZ and those sort of endeavors, we talk about fair data. So data that is, it's an acronym, data that is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And if you think about it, each of those aspects are things that you need to really get the full value out of data. So in my view, biomedical and healthcare data should be properly catalogued. It should have the right access controls, because some of this data is sensitive and it should be accessed for the right reasons by the right people. Interoperability means data from different types of scientific experiments and public health sources, again, are linked in the right way. And the R for reusable means it's there for future research. Data that's generated for one purpose is made available for future discovery. I think getting that all working as a virtuous cycle is then the fuel that powers, future AI innovation.
Absolutely. It seems to be there's so many different components that actually all play a part, and you need them all to work together in order to get the real benefit from it. One of the things you mentioned in your talk was how drug hunters won't be replaced by AI, but those that don't use AI will be replaced by those that do. And I know somebody in our BT research area talks about, Dr. Ben Asveen, talks about Iron Man versus Terminator. So it's augmenting the human versus replacing the human. I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly how we see it, and well remembered from the slide. I think you got it exactly right. And there's lots of different versions of that, by the way. I think you can apply that in lots of different sectors and fields. I think that's the way we can look at AI in a lot of different contexts, and certainly in a scientific context, where I think we absolutely see AI as an enabler, as a digital assistant, as an augmentation engine, as a way of making recommendations, bringing forward new scientific hypotheses, so that the human scientist can then move on to higher level tasks, use their knowledge and their skills to consume the recommendations that are coming from AI engines and machines, and use that to propel our research forward. So we absolutely see AI as a tool for augmenting the work our scientists do in research and development.
Fantastic. And Jim, we'll have in the audience today, we'll have lots of people from either academic backgrounds or young companies who've got great sort of novel new ideas. For anybody listening who've got novel ideas and they maybe want to sort of collaborate and interface with companies such as AstraZeneca, what advice would you give to those guys?
Come and talk to us is the short piece of advice. I mean, as you saw from the slides, we're very collaborative. We believe that science is a team sport. I believe that data science is a team sport, and I think that means that lots of different businesses, public sector institutes, academic institutions all have their sort of niche in that and all have something to offer. We've got some great examples where we do very specific collaborations with smaller companies, and that's because those smaller companies specialize and focus really richly in a particular area of AI innovation. And that's wonderful. We've got the sort of machinery to deploy that into our R&D pipeline, and the partner company can absolutely focus to the exclusion of everything else on a particular innovation or technologies. So yeah, particularly to small companies out there that have got a brainwave or a great innovation or a great idea, come and talk to us. We're open for business, and if there's a mutual fit, we'd love to collaborate.
Fantastic. And so I guess 10 minutes goes really quick for this Q&A, but Jim, I guess the last question for you, there will be, as I say, many students from colleges, from universities listening in right now. For those sort of people that are thinking about data science, AI as a sort of future career, is there any advice that you'd give to those guys as to how they should go about that? Any particular advice from your experience over the years?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because I think formal education in the area of data science is sort of still evolving. We're just starting to see some of the first undergraduate courses, for instance, get accredited. So I think it's still the case today that people come into data science and AI related fields from a number of different backgrounds. Definitely, if you want to be right in the thick of it as a core contributor, it helps to have that sort of foundation of sort of one of the mathematical sciences. But I think even, from a broad set of backgrounds, there's lots of ways in, particularly because of the sort of what I might think of as sort of virtualization of learning and career paths these days. So if I think about, what Coursera have done, or deeplearning.ai with Andrew Ng and some of these other innovators that have kind of brought, I think, very high quality learning online to help people take different career paths. I would say take a look at that and see how you might take yourself in different directions, and also have a bit of a think about where you'd like to have an impact. I'm originally a physicist, but I ended up getting drawn to life sciences because that's kind of what stimulated me and gets me out of bed in the morning and gives me a sense of fulfillment. So think about what it is you really want to do. The great thing about data science is you can take a core set of skills, but then you want to point them at a particular area and build domain knowledge in that area. So when you've figured that out, whether that's public health, engineering, finance, or anything else, life sciences, then go and get as much experience as you possibly can in that area. So lots of, the short answer is there's lots of flexible ways of learning, and have a think where you kind of want to point those skills and what you're going to get a kick out of.
Perfect. No, that's great advice. So Jim, unfortunately we have come to the end of the time for the Q&A, but Jim, once again, thank you ever so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Again, thank you for being part of the AI Festival.
Pleasure. Good to be here. Thanks, Darren.